You speak of her like that again, Paddy hissed, a quiet, terrifying rage trembling in his voice. And the Germans won't find enough of you to send back to Scotland. She is my blood, you arrogant, overprivileged bastard. My blood. Robbie, stop, Josephine screamed, grabbing her brother's arm. But Paddy didn't wait for explanations, he roared. Lunging at Sterling, his massive fist connected with a sickening crack against his former co's jaw. I'll kill you for these a broken bar, sir. Paddy roared, his voice a low, vibrating thunder. He pummeled David with an unbridled rage, seeing the marks on his sister's skin. Sterling hit the stone wall hard, but Paddy didn't let him fall. He grabbed the major by the throat, hoisting him up until Sterling's boots scraped uselessly against the masonry. You animal, Paddy hissed, his voice a low, terrifying vibration that promised death. I see her skin, Sterling. I see what you did to her with your hands. And I can smell the air in here. You didn't just beat her to satisfy the Hun. You used her, my sister, in a cage, while she was broken and bleeding. Sterling spat a mouthful of blood onto Paddy's sleeve, his eyes flashing with a defiant, hollow arrogance even as he choked. She was an Irish collaborator, Paddy. Joyce. I did what I had to do to satisfy the guards. I bought her life with every strike. And as for the rest, she's a woman, Paddy, and we're alive. And a broken bar. He chanced to glance at Josephine, the last thread of determined doubt clinging to his hindbrain. And your sister a broken bar? Paddy drew back his head and slammed it into Sterling's nose. There was a crunch, and a good deal of blood. Sterling staggered back, hands to his face. She's a woman, she's not a collaborator or a broken bar. She's the only one of us who actually did her job while you were busy being led by your cock through North Africa. You laid hands on her to save your own skin, and then you took what was left. If I didn't need you alive for the inquiry, I'd throttle you right here. He pushed Sterling aside, and David slumped in the corner, clutching his nose, his eyes darting with a toxic, jealous heat towards the door. I'm here, Paddy continued, reaching out to Josephine. Armin's a broken bar is here. Broken bar Seekings, Gershaw, Drusy a broken bar. At the mention of the name, Josephine's head whipped toward the corridor. Through the haze of smoke and the shouting of the advancing commandos, a man appeared. Henry Druce, her former colleague, the man she had worked beside in the SAR before the betrayal. Henry? Her voice was a broken whisper. He was dead. He died, horribly. Hadn't he a broken bar? Druce stepped into the light, battered but alive. Without a thought for decorum or the man she had just shared a bed of stone with, Josephine threw herself at him. She collided with Druce, her arms wrapping around his neck in a fierce, desperate embrace, her face buried in his shoulder as she sobbed with the sheer, overwhelming weight of seeing a ghost return to life. Sterling, slumped against the wall and spitting blood, felt a surge of white-hot envy that burned worse than Paddy's punch. He had just possessed her, had just felt her narrow walls clench around his massive girth in a rhythm of absolute surrender, yet she had never held him like that. She had never looked at him with that raw, unfiltered devotion. He watched her cling to Druce, his jaw tightening until it ached. Henry Druce had ignored the violence. He was on his knees beside Josephine, his large, calloused hands remarkably gentle as he pulled her tunic back over her bruised shoulders, shielding her from David's gaze. It's me, Joe. It's Henry, he whispered, his voice a soothing balm against the jagged edges of the room. He took her shaking hands in his. Remember the farmhouse in Normandy? The cider we stole when the patrols were 10 yards away? We're going back there. No more radios, no more codes. Josephine looked at him, her grey eyes finally softening, the main steel melting into tears. She sold us, Henry. She told them everything. I thought you were dead in that field. I'm hard to kill, Joe. You know that, Henry murmured, pulling her close, letting her bury her face in his neck. He began to recount their old times in the French resistance, the narrow misses, the shared cigarettes in the rain, the quiet moments of competence that Eve had never been able to touch. He was anchoring her, pulling her back from the brink. We're the ones who survived, Joe. Not the traitors. Is she? Josephine asked, her voice muffled against his woolen jacket. "Hanged," Henry said firmly, casting a sharp, warning glance at Sterling. Dudley Clark oversaw the whole thing at Holloway. The trapdoor opened, the rope snapped, and the hurricane is over. "She's in a pit in London, Joe. She can't ever hurt us again." Josephine let out a long, shuddering sob of relief, clinging to Henry with a desperate strength that ignored Sterling's existence entirely. In the corner, David watched them, his heart a blackened coal. He saw the way she looked at Druce, with a trust he could now no longer earn or possess. He looked at Paddy, who was still hovering like a predator, and then back at the girl he had claimed in the dark. He didn't believe Druce. He knew Dudley Clark. He knew the world of shadows. Sterling's mind was already moving past the war. He would be out if there, one day, whether Eve was in a grave or a safe house, he would find her. "Get her out of here, Paddy," Sterling croaked, his voice thick with a bitterness he couldn't hide, curdled with a measure of bitterness on hearing of Eve's execution. "Take her and her colleague and go." Maine reached out, catching Josephine by the shoulder and wrenching her away from Druce with a tenderness belying his manner of entry. He pulled her into the crook of his arm, and made to go. Josephine turned back, outraged. "I won't leave him!" Josephine cried, wrenching herself back towards Sterling, her voice cracking. "I promised Bill. I told your brother I would get you out, David. I didn't endure this hell just to leave you to a firing squad." Sterling looked up, the mockery finally dying. He saw the smudge of his own sweat on her neck, the way she was shivering in his coat, and the way she still glanced at Druce. He felt elated and destroyed all at once. "Paddy," Sterling said with commanding calm, "whatever you need to do, get her out of here, now. Take her through the laundry flues." "That's an order, Blair." He reached for his heavy coat and threw it around Josephine's shoulders. "None of us follow orders," Paddy told him. "You told me that." He looked at Paddy, looked at David, his friend, his major, and the man who had just spent the night violating and loving his sister in equal measure. He wanted to kill him, and he wanted to save him. He hoisted Josephine off her feet, ignoring her scream of protest as he threw her over his shoulder. "I'll see you in the woods, Sterling," Paddy returned, his voice a promise of future reckoning. "And if you're not there, I'll come back and dig up the ruins until I find what's left of you." As Paddy plunged into the orange atmosphere of the burning corridor, Sterling watched the hem of his own coat disappear around the corner, his heart feeling as empty out as the fortress around him, before taking up a dropped pistol and joined the fun. 88,888,888. Paddy moved through the choking soot of the laundry flues with the grim efficiency of a predator, Josephine a heavy, struggling weight over his shoulder. The air was thick with the stench of old washing soap and old smoke. He didn't slow down, even as Joey's fists drummed against his back, demanding to be let down. Alarms shrieked as they exited the laundry, Armand's hammering lead after lead up the stairs as the German guards rushed in. Paddy met them like a force of nature. He didn't just fight, he dismantled them. He moved through the garrison with a terrifying, animalistic speed, his knife in bare hands leaving a trail of red ruin. Paddy didn't stop there. He hunted the commandant of Colditz through the winding stone stairs, cornering him in his office. There was no mercy, no prisoner of war protocol. Paddy silenced the man forever, a final, bloody tribute to the pain his sister had endured. Finally, they reached the narrow stone egress that spilled out into the tangled, frostbitten woods behind the fortress. Paddy dropped her onto a bed of dead leaves and frozen mud with a jarring lack of ceremony. He didn't look back at the burning castle. His eyes, wild and bloodshot, were fixed entirely on his sister. He paced a small, tight circle, his Thompson still gripped in one hand while the other white-knuckled the hilt of his Fairbairn Sykes. The silence of the woods was punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic thud of sporadic artillery. "You're alive," he stated, his voice a low, dangerous vibration. "Against every report, every scrap of intelligence. You're alive." Josephine pulled Sterling's heavy coat tighter around her, shivering as the adrenaline began to ebb, leaving her emotions raw and exposed. "I tried to," she began, but Paddy cut her off. stepping into her space with a suddenness that made her breath hitch. He wasn't looking at her face, he was looking at the way she moved, the slight, stiff ache in her stride, and the dark, telltale smears on the wool of the coat. The smell of musk and sweat clung to her like a second skin. Paddy leaned down, his face inches from hers, his eyes searching for the truth in the wreckage of her expression. "Just how long?" he hissed, the words dripping with a mixture of brotherly protectiveness and soldier's disgust. "Has that arrogant Scottish bastard been a broken bar with you?" Josephine stared up at him, her chin trembling even as her eyes flashed with that familiar main defiance. She thought of the months in the dark, the bickering that turned into desperate touching, the way David's massive frame had been the only thing keeping the walls from crushing her. When she didn't answer immediately, Paddy took a step back and put a hand to his head. "No, actually no, I don't want to know." A shuffling beside them drew their more loudly than necessary conversation to a halt. Around them, still gunfire and artillery, but much less than it had been, less frequent, less intense. Jim Armans cleared his throat. "Where now, Paddy?" he asked. "Home." "We got your sister out." He nodded, perfunctorily to Josephine. "Not yet," Paddy replied, grimly. "Leipzig. I have some unfinished business in Leipzig."